This is The Mud Peddlers, a podcast where two nerdy ceramic artists share the behind the scenes of their worlds of clay. We are your hosts, Lindsey M Dillon.
And I am Donte of Earth Nation.
All right, ladles, gentle spoons, and all manner of fine cutlery. Welcome to this episode of The Mud Peddlers. We are super excited. We have a guest, Sue McLeod, on, and if you have listened to The Mud Peddlers for any length of time, you have heard us fangirl about her work for a long while now. So, Sue, welcome to The Mud Peddlers.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
We are also very
excited to have you. You're the person who gave me the suggestion of, like, every time you load your kiln, put one testile in, at least one testile to test your glazes. And I put more than one, but at least one. One is the minimum for like a line test. Yeah, and it helps me a lot.
Yeah. Well, for folks who may not know your work, Sue, why don't you introduce yourself and just kind of talk about what you do?
Yeah, so I'm Sue McLeod. I live on Vancouver Island in Canada, British Columbia, Canada. And I have been a potter since I first started in 2008. And I did a 2-year clay diploma program at Kootenai School of the Arts in Nelson, BC. And then since then, I was a production potter for about 4 years, making and selling pots at markets. I got really burnt out with that. I decided to take a year off of selling my pots to like figure out how I was going to make a living in the pottery world. And in that time, it was I had just done my very last Christmas market, which I did every market, under the sun.
Yeah.
And I did juried shows, I did like fall fairs, I did weekend farmers markets. And I was trying everything. I was in a couple of galleries and I was just like, I just didn't like selling my pots. Like I didn't like the process of selling my work.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so much work. Like I was always the first one to arrive and the last one to take, like packing up all my unsold pots at the end of the market. And it was just like, I was so jealous of like the fiber artists and the jewelry artists that could just like put their stuff in a briefcase and walk away.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah.
They don't have to wait for their product to dry.
Yeah. It's a whole moving ceramics is such a, it's an exhausting process. Like I only do 2 shows a year and that feels like plenty for me. I can't imagine doing it as much as you did. So.
Yeah, and I did this one show. It's in Vancouver. It's called Circle Craft, which is like 5 or 6 days long. And it's just like you're there from 10 a.m. till 9 p.m. every day, just like exerting. I'm an introvert, and you're like exerting yourself the whole time. And
There's
yeah.
only so many like highs you can give until you're like, well, yeah. Once you have a question about the pottery, ask me.
Yeah.
I just wanted to talk about glazes. So I would like start talking about glaze chemistry to people who really didn't like
They have no idea.
I just like blue. And so I don't know if this
We were talking about that right before the podcast.
really
We're talking about the blue
cup dynamic.
The blue cup dynamic in the economy right before the podcast.
Everyone likes blue. And I didn't make blue pots. I made green pots. Because so I there was just this disconnect. Like, is this what I'm meant to be doing? I don't know. And I'm very slow and I want to make every piece unique. So I wasn't into like multiples, repeating, just production mode. So I was like, okay, I got to take a break so that I can clear my mind and figure out what's next. And in that time, it was a couple months later, it was March after December, Christmas. It was March when this job posting was posted for a full-time ceramic studio technician at a local pottery public studio. And I was like, oh my gosh, it was a government job with benefits. And I was like, is this the step?
In a heartbeat, right?
Yeah. And I was having all sorts of like imposter scarcity thoughts. Like I was like, there's no way I'm qualified to do this. But I'm like, actually, I think I am. And because I love all the technical, like I loved I would procrastinate making pots by like cleaning kiln shelves and recycling my clay and doing all the behind the scenes stuff that we just don't really get paid for, but needs to be done anyways, cleaning my studio. So I applied and I got this position. And so then I had a full-time job in a pottery studio where I was mixing glazes and recycling clay and loading and firing kilns and doing all this stuff that I love. There's a gas kiln there, which was awesome because we had a gas kiln when I went to school, but then it's like I was, I lived in an apartment for a while and just living in the city, renting, there's no option. So I got to fire a gas kiln for 6 years. So I ended up working there for 6 years and it was my dream job and it was amazing. I got to really nerd out on all the things that I love to nerd out about. And I quickly became known as the glaze girl, like because I just took this studio, there was 20 studio glazes, and I just figured out how to get them all working really well and then passed along that information to the teachers and the students. I changed some of the recipes that were, I thought, maybe slightly under fired. So I just helped them to melt a little bit better. And so it was perfect. And then in that time, I started teaching local workshops about glazes and glaze chemistry, like specific gravity, all sorts of like whatever I could teach. And then eventually I kind of ran out of a local, like I taught everyone that was around and
Yeah, they knew. They're like, oh, I know how to weigh my water now. Thanks.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like, okay, so I've saturated the Victoria market. And then so then I just started, I was like, well, I might as well make some online classes. And then I started teaching online and then COVID happened and online learning kind of took off and I was already teaching online. So COVID kind of was like this blessing in disguise where I was able to quit my job at the studio and start teaching online about glazes full time. So that's what I do now. I just spend all my time testing glazes and teaching students. I have like 3 online courses and a membership called the Glaze Lab. And so that's what I do.
Love that. I think I remember getting the email that you sent out because I signed up for your newsletter for years ago. And I
Okay.
remember getting that email about like kind of talking about your process making that decision. And that's something I wanted to like, again, ask you more about and like especially for our listeners, because I like since I'm super interested in like the business side of how people make a career in ceramics work. And like I'm kind of at the point in my life where I'm like, I'm too stressed. I'm just going to do the government job route, like not even related to ceramics, but so that I can start enjoying ceramics more again because I'm kind of burnt out of like being stressed all the time of the file. Like I have not been able to find a way to make it work, but I know that people do. So I really want to know like more about when you were making that decision to go from leaving the studio technician to teaching full time as a self-employed educator, what were some of the big things that were like check off marks for you that made you go, okay, like this is feasible, this is something that I can do long term and still be financially secure and stable?
Yeah, so I went from 5 days a week to 3 days a week. And so that was I did like submit a proposal and everything to go down to part-time. And I was very grateful that they let me do that. So I was 4 years full-time and then 2 years part-time. So that going down to 3 days a week, that gave me 4 days off where I could work on my business. And so I actually replaced my income before I quit my job, if you know what I mean. So
Yeah, yeah,
I was
yeah.
hustling, working a lot at home on my online business. And then COVID kind of gave me this excuse, I guess. I mean, I just needed a break. I was overwhelmed with everything that was going on in the world. So I took a leave of absence. So I was able to just leave my job, but not quit my job and just test the waters, see if I could make this work full time. And it worked way better than I expected to. It was like everything kind of fell into place perfectly just because of the pandemic and everyone was at home. Because at first it was kind of like, oh, I'm going to take a pottery class online. Like, that's kind of weird. There weren't many people teaching online, but then it just became super normal. Everyone was learning everything online. And so that
Right.
helped since I had already had courses that were running when everyone was like, oh, yeah, online learning's great. I don't have to go anywhere. And the other thing about glazes in particular is that when I was, I had left my art school and was at home and I wanted to learn about glazes and I was like, where am I going to learn? I don't know. Like, do I have to move and go to college somewhere? And there was nowhere to learn. And then all of a sudden, Alfred University and Matt Katz, he started teaching online. And so I was like, yay, I get to keep learning about glazes. I don't have to move, go take a program somewhere and like learn all these other subjects that maybe I don't want to learn. I just wanted to learn about glazes.
Yeah, yeah.
And I took his clay bodies class as well because once you're nerding out, you just want to keep nerding out about everything.
Yeah, it's hard to stop. It's really hard to stop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then that allowed me to learn like at the level that I wanted to understand about glazes, which gave me at that time I was working at the rec center and I was I took these classes and then I was using the knowledge to improve glazes and it was working. And I was like, this is great. And it was just became an obsession. I mean, it was kind of an obsession right from the beginning, right when I learned how I could take a base glaze and test it with different colorants. When I was back in school in Nelson, each student in the class took two base glazes and we tested them with 45 different colorant variations each.
Oh my God.
Is yeah, hardcore. But I was like, this is amazing. Because when I was in high school, I was really good at math and chemistry, and I just never pursued it beyond like first year of college. And then I went traveling my entire 20s. I just went traveling. I was like, college, not really for me until I discovered, oh, I'm going to go to art school. And then
Yeah.
came full circle back to math and science. I was like, oh, hey, I'm actually kind of good at this aspect of pottery. I had to learn how to be more artistic because I'm a very analytical kind of data driven person. And I had to like let go of a lot of like symmetry and like making pots. I had to let loose a little bit.
Yeah.
And like be less calculated. But then when it came to the glazes, it was like that's where all of my more calculated type side of my brain got to shine and use it in a creative way. So both of these parts of me were being fulfilled in different ways through ceramics because I got to be creative and artistic. And then I also got to be nerdy and mathematical and scientific. So it's perfect. And so now I'm just like, yeah, this is perfect. Like, this is what I meant to do. And it took kind of quitting a little bit to open up space for something new to take that place and then a pandemic kind of to push me into taking the leap and pursuing this full time. Yeah, so it's good. I'm glad it all worked out. Now, like when I first took my leave of absence to away from my job, all I wanted was to be away from the public. I was just like, people,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
germs, and I was just like,
You're all that way.
yeah, I was so uncomfortable and I was kind of in charge of making sure everyone was 6 feet apart and all that stuff and washing their hands. And I was just like, oh, I can't handle this. And so all I wanted was to be home. And now I've been working from home for like the past 5 years, I guess, almost 4.5 years. And now I'm like getting a little bit like, I need to go out and do things. Like I kind of like on the other side,
Yeah.
where I'm craving community a little bit more, but
Are
finding
you
I'm not there yet.
balance.
still in hermit mode?
If you put a bed in my garage, I'd be all right.
I think I'd have to drag Dante out for sure and be like, come on.
Just open the garage door a little bit and like roll some boba underneath every now and then. You'll see a hand like, and
Yeah.
I'll be okay.
Yeah.
When you think about seeking community, are you wanting to find community within like the ceramics community, or is it more like even just in your personal social life, like kind of getting out in the community more? What are you kind of leaning towards?
Yeah, I mean, I think eventually I had to, because I'm just ceramics all the time now. And so I'm singing a choir and
Oh, that's
I'm a
cool.
canoeist. So I go paddling and I join the canoe club and I go to yoga classes. And so I'm doing things that aren't ceramics related.
Mhm.
And that's really fulfilling because when your whole life is ceramics, it's kind of like, yeah, it just feels a little much. Like, and
Yeah.
my boyfriend partner, he's not a potter, he's an artist and he's a singer as well, but and so it's kind of, yeah, I like having both things in my life. Like I think if he was a potter, I would be less inclined to like do non-pottery things, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah. How do you structure your business so that you are able to have that time? Because I think that's like one of the messages that you hear a lot. And again, maybe I'm just speaking just for myself, but I'll say like I feel like a lot of the times you hear that like, oh yeah, if you're doing ceramics full time, you know, you are living and breathing this stuff. Like my main like model for how to do ceramics full time is this guy. And like this guy's like you
I'm a
work
workaholic.
work so much. And I'm
Working is a
like,
personality for me.
yeah.
That's all it is. If I can't sit on the couch for 3 hours and like scroll, because then I'll get in my own head. Like, what am I doing with my life? Why am I alive? Why am I here on Earth? Just look at this little light box and stimulate myself. I need to move now. Like I need to do something that's yeah.
Yeah, and I definitely need more balance. I like having other things like outside of ceramics to do as well. So how do you balance your schedule and your like your income so that you're able to do that?
yeah, well, I'm very structured with my time. A lot of my time is spent behind a computer, which is not ideal. So I'm trying to find balance between how much time I'm on my computer doing the administrative tasks involved with running an online business, and
Mhm.
then my studio time, which is the more fulfilling for me. I bought a test kiln like a year ago, like a little tiny one, and then I have like a bigger test kiln as well. And so I'm trying to spend at least one full day a week in my studio just exploring glazes and experimenting. But I spent, a couple of years straight was just like learning about how to create classes and put them online and how to market and learning about all of that stuff. I started a membership, so I took a course on how to create a membership program
Yeah.
and so now so I'm trying in my business, like I work Tuesday to Saturday, although sometimes I take Saturdays off, so I always take Sunday Monday off of work, and I'm just very good, like, because if I don't, it really affects my mental health. I start
Yeah.
to I just can't stop thinking. I'm an overthinker. I'm also naturally a workaholic, so I have to force myself not to work.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I have to be very strict about that. And I learned that a couple of years ago. So I've been pretty good about that for the last couple of years. And on my work days, I just work really hard and I have to learn that nothing is really that urgent. It always seems like I gotta get
Mm.
all this stuff done. Like I gotta do this and this and this and this, and there's all these things that need doing. And then I get overwhelmed with all the things that I need to do, like market and social media and all of that stuff. And I feel I put a lot of pressure on myself to like do it all right. And then I just every now and then I have to like take a step back and be like, actually, like everyone's going to be okay if you don't post on social media today, or if you don't, like if everything's not perfect, or I'm also a perfectionist. So in the
Mm.
beginning, my videos were I would like write out everything I was going to say first, and then I would read it. And now I'm a little more comfortable behind the camera. So now I just talk. But yeah, I was just kind of, it's been an evolution. It's been definitely a process in figuring that out and learning where, what feels good and what doesn't feel good. But
Yeah.
yeah, but when I was making, when you're making pots, it's different because you kind of have to be in the studio almost every day because things are drying out and you can't just you can only have so many damp boxes where you're like neglecting your pots. And which I have a couple for sure, because it's just like, your pots need your attention or they're just not going to work out. And so it is easier to, I guess, take time off when I'm not making pots for sale as much. But yeah, I don't know what the answer is. It's just like
Yeah.
trying things and figuring out what works and what doesn't. And but I am very kind of strict about like what my work hours are, and then when I'm off work, I'm just not allowed to work, even though I'm always thinking about work.
Always still thinking about it. Yeah.
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 Like you could, but you'll burn out if you do. So it's better just for you and your workload to not, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. And I just like make sure I have a notepad near me at all times so I can like, if I have ideas, I'll just write them down and deal with them tomorrow. Because when you take
Yeah.
a break, that's when all your ideas come and you're like, "Ooh, I can't
Yeah.
wait." But
Mhm.
you still need that break. And that's telling you that the break is working. Your body
Yeah.
is like allowing itself to rest and rejuvenate. And because otherwise you stifle your creative energy if you just keep working and working and inputting and like putting stuff in there, and you don't ever have time to kind of just let it all work out. So
Yeah. I definitely I can relate to that a lot. Like I think when I finally decided that I wanted to have a separate job as like my primary source of income, it's ironic because of course now I'm realizing like I'm getting all these ideas for like I never really thought about teaching like workshops because as soon as like I would have a thought of like, oh, I could like teach a workshop, it's like, okay, well, how am I going to market it? How am I going to
Yeah.
make sure that it's worth? Because since I have made my money primarily by like making and selling pots, the thought was every hour that I don't spend making pots, like is like
A negative.
is like a negative,
Yeah,
yeah,
to
because
your
it's
money.
like, yeah. So I always I ran into so many roadblocks that I never made progress, even though I'm sure it would have like I would have been able to figure out how to make it work. But now that I'm not now that I sort of have a more long-term plan for like financial security,
Right.
I'm having all these ideas about like different like projects I could work on, different like teaching things, different like little things that are a way to have like again there's no such thing as passive income because of course you're always having to maintain those so-called passive things,
mhm.
but it's a little bit more um beginning to have all these different ideas for things that I want to work on. So that makes me think about, again, we were talking about just generally how much you enjoy experimenting with glazes. And I know that Dante had a bunch of questions about that.
I
So
have problems.
Okay.
I have
Yeah.
problems. They're not actual problems. I don't have problems with the chemistry of my glazes. I have mental problems with liking glazes too much. Every time I'm like, I'm gonna stop developing glazes, and then 2 weeks later, I'm like, Lindsey, I just took out all the free floating silica out of this glaze to make it more melty. I call it my flux glaze line, and she's like, "That's you said you were gonna stop 2 weeks anyway."
I'm very excited for all of your research. I just know that when you say you're stopping, I'm like,
That's a
lies.
lie.
He lies to
It's a
himself.
lie. So I've been spending the last year developing a ancient copper-ish type glaze to
Yes.
note amicos, and it's
Yes.
like a deep iron saturated khaki red type glaze.
Yes.
And they're notoriously hard to develop, and had no, I wouldn't say no, I had very little help in that I didn't know if they were like a tin chrome red that somebody put too much zinc inside of so that it
Mhm.
turns like a reddish crystal glaze because it was pretty clearly like red crystals. I didn't know if it was like iron and zinc.
Yep.
And then I found out the hard way that iron and zinc don't get along really well. So I didn't understand. And then I ended up taking more CMW classes
Yep.
from Matt Katz and Rose Katz, and I didn't like
CMW meaning Ceramic Materials Workshop for our dear
yes.
listeners.
And sooner or later, I found someone who went through the same troubles as me, who was basically like, you just pretty much treat it like a crystal glaze. Like it's pretty much just a low end crystal glaze, low alumina, low silica. It's just iron. And after I learned that, of course, I balanced the flux ratios and the alumina to silica ratios and yada 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 yada. Here's my one of my two questions. Right,
Yep.
number one, are you a molar amount person? Are you a UMF molar amount person like I am, or are you a chemical reaction person where you're like, I look at the reactions of the glaze, not so much the chemistry? Or do you do
I look
both?
I look at the chemist. Well, I mean, I compare both. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
I wanna
so
know.
in my mind, if I were to tier up, if I were to like start from a base, and I've told Lindsay this before, if I were to start from a base of glaze making, it's like, okay, I know nothing about glazes. I need to learn how to read a recipe. Okay, and then I need to get a gram scale, and then I need to know how to deal with grams. Okay, and then I need to know how to weigh my water. Okay. Then I need to know how to do specific gravity. Cool. And then you learn how to replace the colorants. Cool. And then you learn how to do a line test, and you keep going until you're getting to like molar amounts,
Yes.
right? And it seems to me that after molar amounts, there are people who've been doing it for a little too long and they go, I just kind of look at the glaze real hard and then I think about what it needs in comparison to what it has, you know? Like the amount of glazes that I run into that are just like free floating silica everywhere from either their frit or from like there's people who put like 10 grams of bentonite and stuff and I'm like, Jesus, why? Why are you putting 10 grams of bentonite in your stuff? But I do run into people who are just like, nope, I don't do molar amounts. I just look at the glaze and then I end up replacing things that I need just by the look of it. And those
Oh
people
no.
amaze.
I look at the numbers.
Yeah, I look at the numbers and the molar amounts.
Yeah.
The other question I want to ask you is, have you run into glazes that are cone six and are not Bristol effect glazes, nor are they boron glazes? Because I'm running into a family of glazes that traditionally speaking, you take cone 10 and you pump like boron into it, or you do Bristol effect to the point where the glass former is lower melting temperature than silica, and it turns
Yeah.
into like cone 6, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
I'm running into a family of glaze that completes all of its chemical reactions with no boron and no Bristol effect. It just for some reason it just works. And
Okay.
I've tried to overfire it, and I've tried to because my initial reaction is, well, maybe it's not fired all the way, and I'm just getting a different effect. No, it goes to cone 7 and it melts off the pot. And I'm
Okay.
wondering if you've run into this as well.
Does it have very low alumina levels?
Has very low alumina and silica. The molar amounts are around 2.0 to zero point 0.2. So it starts melting at like cone 2 and it
Okay.
should finish around cone 5 or 6, right?
Yeah.
But
And the R2O flux is not super high. Um,
no,
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 okay.
the latest one that I can think of was metal was 24 and earth was like 66 or something like that.
Okay.
Or 76 or something like
70.
that. And it
And
yeah,
and and
76.
and dear listeners, just know that if you're getting a little lost, it's okay. I'm right here with you. We're just going
Yeah.
along for the ride.
And of course you want 0307, but I'm like because I ended up trying to develop this iron saturated khaki blah 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 for so long that it took me a good 3 months to balance the silica to alumina ratio with the alkali metal flux because
Hmm.
so many of them that I find online are just like 33 metal flux to like 67 earth, and I'm like, damn, that's a little too high for
Right,
me. I Anything over 0307 or 03 is kind of a little too high for me. But the ones that I'm encountering are like 24.
right. So
And
within like the range, the accept the
within
accepted
the
range.
acceptable range. Yeah, for me they don't have to be perfect. For me, as long as they're not like 18, and then something else, I'm like, okay, all right, that's okay. But
Yeah. So like reasons why a glaze could melt at cone six without boron or zinc are generally low alumina, or I mean, if it's got high amounts of iron, like are you talking about your iron glazes? Because iron
yeah,
is a flux, right?
okay.
And
Yes. So is it an earth flux?
yes,
Okay,
apparently, yes.
apparently right. So is it my question is the earth flux so strong that I can just like disavow boron and call it a day? Is that what's going on? Because that's the one thing I don't really know.
I mean, if you're getting your glazes to melt with low alumina and high iron, then I mean, I don't really have the answers about the quality of glaze. Like I understand the melting of the glaze, like I
Yeah.
understand melting temperature, but
Yes.
I think that there's no real like we don't really know is that going to be a good glaze like for food surfaces or not? Or is
Mm.
it going to be durable? Is it going to be a strong glaze or is it going to leach all that iron out into people's food? like I have seen lots of glazes that will melt at cone 6 without boron or zinc just because when you have low alumina, essentially your alumina and silica, your high melting temperature glass formers go down, proportionately your fluxes go up. So
Yes.
yeah, so now you have more flux, less glass former competing with the flux. And so that's what brings the melting temperature down. And then
Right.
the iron is also contributing to the flux as well. And so when you say 0.24, is that like R2O flux? Is that in the extended UMF or the regular UMF?
The regular UMF. I try not to use the extended because it ends up messing up my iron. It's one of the reasons I use
Yeah,
yellow iron oxide, is because yellow iron oxide is very much just like, here's how much iron's in your stuff.
it just
But
stays out.
black, exactly, it stays up. But black iron oxide is like, oh, here's a different form of iron, and then here's also like iron dioxide or whatever. It's a different form of iron two different times, and I'm like, well, I can't add those numbers up. I need like a straight one iron number,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know?
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Like I often will just look at the regular UMF, but I will look at the extended just to see, but it's my brain like processes both of those things very differently. And so
Yeah.
sometimes it's hard to bring the iron in and understand what's happening to the glaze. I like to keep it out. So I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
But then it can be also very informative if you're confused about something. Oh, maybe I should look at the extended UMF and see what's going on, because if you're talking like 10 to 15% iron, that's a significant proportion of your glaze recipe that is also a flux that you're adding, but it's not really being included in the equation in the UMF. But once you bring it in, everything else goes down. So now
Mhm.
your glass formers have gone down and your R2O has gone down, or
Just the ratio. Yeah, yeah. That makes sense.
I think iron is a powerful flux. I haven't done a lot of testing. I think it would be interesting to just take whatever glaze that you've been working on, and I don't know, maybe you've done this, but do a line blend of the base without iron, and then the base with all of the iron that you have in the recipe, and just see how the melting changes.
It's a good idea.
Yeah, because if that's a great way to understand how one material is affecting the melting of a glaze. And so, but if you're, what is it? Ancient copper? Is that then like the
I'm using
glaze?
I'm using the name ancient copper because everyone's familiar with that, but truly
Yeah,
it's a deep iron saturated khaki red glaze. It's in like the same family of Tenmoku golds and
yeah,
like
yeah.
old spots, you know?
Yeah. So my guess is that if you remove all of the iron, maybe the glaze would be underfired. I don't
Mhm.
know. So that would
Okay.
be something to try. So the base without the iron, is that melting well? Because
I
I would
have never
guess,
tested the base.
yeah, I would guess that it's not. So Randy's Red is a glaze recipe that we used at the rec center where I worked, and it has 15% red iron oxide.
Mm.
And I tested it without the iron, and it's a matte. It seems potentially underfired without the iron. So the iron, even though it has quite low alumina, which I think is helping it turn red,
Right, right.
but it's a very different glaze without the iron, where it's just like this white flat matte glaze.
Yeah.
Mm.
And
And
Randy's red has so much boron in it too.
it does.
Like so much Gerste borate. Like
Yep.
it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Like it's more than it needs, really. But it's probably you're probably right in the fact that like it turns red because it has such a low temperature glass former or flux in it or something like that. You know,
Mm.
has all
Yeah.
these things helping it out. Where it's like it's oh my god, Randy's red.
Yeah. How often for the folks that you're teaching about glazes, like are most of the folks when you teach, are they folks who are kind of, I guess, honestly, I guess kind of more like me, where it's like I know some basics, like I've put together a glaze before, but I don't understand, like I haven't taken Rose and Matt Katz's ceramic materials workshop.
Mhm.
So I can listen and I can pick up certain things, but there's a lot that like goes over my head. Like when you're developing your curriculum, how do you figure out what your audience is going to be for each one, so that like 'cause part of me
Yeah.
wonders like how many ceramic artists are out there like able to like talk like you guys are talking, and like do you help educate them with that? Because I don't know, yeah, it's just like there's so much stuff that's like the behind the scenes like chemistry part of ceramics that
Hmm.
is not often taught at like the base level of like if you go to college or you go to a community center and you're taking an intro to ceramics class. So
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So I have a course called Glaze Mixing Essentials, which is just how to mix glazes from scratch, how to do colorant testing. So that's like the basics for someone who uses commercial glazes or someone else mixes their glazes, they want to start making their own. So there's no chemistry in that class. And then I have the art of glaze chemistry, which is for anyone who mixes their own glazes, but they don't have to have any knowledge of what we're talking about here, chemistry. So
gotcha. Okay.
I could take you, someone like you who self-identifies as not understanding what we're talking about.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
And if you took that class, like, yeah, you would get to a point where you would be participating in this conversation, like just
Okay.
like we are. Yeah.
Cool.
And it's a 10-week program. And so we start at the very beginning, the very basics. And I don't assume anyone understand, like I assume everyone's artists, and the only knowledge you need coming in is you have to have experience glazing pots, and you have
Mhm.
to already know how to mix a glaze from a recipe. But that's about it. And then I take you through like step by step by step and just teach you all of the science. And I share all the
Yeah.
testing that I've done that kind of demonstrates how the chemistry works. And then we get into like all the different colorants and how they're affected by which flux you choose. And we talk about thermal expansion and crazing. That's like at the very end of the class. But yeah, it's like from where you are now, from wherever you are now, to where like, and you do it, there's homework for you to do so that you can, understand it more than on a theoretical level. I think it's very important to actually do the test and unload the kiln and see how the information that you're being bombarded with, like how
Mhm.
that translates into a fired glaze on a textile. I think that's a really key part to really the experience of learning, where it's not just information, it's actually experience. And I'm just seeing, because there's so many exceptions in ceramics. So you learn one
Yeah.
thing, but it's like, except for if this and this and this is true, then it
Yeah,
definitely
that's
doesn't work.
chemistry though.
Yeah. And so I don't know, the way my brain works, I think it helps me to teach this because I need, like, if I miss a step when I was in school, if I missed a day of school, I would be so far behind. And so I need like every step, and every step has to kind of build on the last step in order for me to understand it. And if there's anything missing, then I'm just completely lost. And so that's how I teach. I don't leave anything out. I'm like, okay, and if this, then this, and if that, then that.
Yeah.
And I like take into consideration that people live all over the world and not everyone is just in North America. And I learn a lot from my students as well. I'm never like at a point where I'm like, oh, I'm the teacher and you're the student and I know more than you. Like I'm very open to learning and being wrong about things, or like learning that what I used to think was true actually isn't always true. And being very open about like science isn't just written in stone. Science is meant to be tested and evolved. And as we learn more things, sometimes the science that we thought was like it's the science is actually, oh, that actually maybe isn't always true. And so I think that's a really important piece of teaching and learning something complicated such as glaze chemistry, and also remembering that people are artists. And a lot of people are like, oh, I don't want to learn chemistry, that sounds hard and that sounds
Yeah,
like
Yeah.
school. And I'm retired and I was in high school like 50 years ago, and this isn't for me. But I don't know, I find a lot of joy in like bringing those people into my class and being like, okay, just give it a try. Like there's no, I have a refund policy. If someone's like no
Uh,
way, that's totally fine. I've never been asked for a refund
oh,
because they're
good.
like, I show them right away that they can do it and that it is possible for them to learn no matter their age or their background. And I just have such enthusiasm for it, and I think that rubs off on my students as well. And yeah,
Yeah.
I have one more. I have one more.
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, no, go.
Do you blend? Do you blend or sieve your glazes?
Oh,
When I first learned how to make glazes, like one of the things that really helped with the efficacy of my glaze was to start sieving them. And then I started, I was like, oh, you really got to sieve your glazes. Like, and then I started to learn, like, okay, well, I should probably use like 80% of the water in making my glaze. And then for cleanup, because you get a little bit of water in there and you wish it around. And those are still minerals that count towards how your glaze works. You don't want to just leave them out. So I use that other 20% to clean up. And so I get all the minerals that are 100% of the recipe. So over time, I've just been like, no, I'm not doing all that work. So now I put it in like a Bella blender, like a Ninja blender. And I just blend them.
yeah.
I just blend them and I blend them for like a minute straight, and then I'm like, yeah, it's all in there. And then I test it from the blender itself.
Uh-huh.
And I was wondering if you've gotten to that point too, where you're like, no, I'm not doing all that. No, 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 no. I'm just gonna blend.
no, I'm very diligent. I sieve every glaze. I sieve when I add colorants to a glaze.
Yes.
At the rec center, we sieved our every studio glaze on a monthly basis.
Mhm.
Because like the chunkies that build up on the inside of the buckets, I
That
can't
counts.
stand that. So yeah,
Yeah.
so we're scraping all of that in, high speed mix and sieve every time. So
That's
Yeah.
also the stuff like the crust you're talking about on the side is still like it's still glaze,
yeah,
Mhm.
and that's still part of the recipe.
Yep.
yeah.
And so, like, getting that off is like, oh, I'm getting more of the minerals that I originally put in. I'm glad you said that. Yeah, I sieve like 3 times, but if I'm doing a 100-gram batch, I'm just like, no, that's enough.
Yeah.
But if I'm making a large bucket, I have to sieve at least 3 times back and forth.
I've been punished anytime I've tried to cut corners. And so so I just don't do it. Like, so I decided not to sieve a glaze once. And then it comes out, you think it's fine. And then it has all these chunkies in the glaze.
Yeah,
And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, so I just do it in advance because otherwise I'm disappointed
yeah. And
later.
every chunk
Yeah.
is a non-dispersed amount of mineral you put in there. So like my
Yeah.
Walstonite is extra chunky. So if
Mhm.
I don't if I don't like crush it up or sieve it or smash it down or blend it, you're right. I get punished because the rest of the Walstonite isn't dispersed through the suspension of glaze. And now I have less Walstonite through the entire glaze, and then it turns out brown, and I'm like, okay, well, that's my fault.
Yep.
That's on me.
It do be like
Yeah.
that.
It,
It do be
it
like
do
that.
be like that.
Yeah.
It do be like that.
I know that teaching has been a huge part of what you do. And one of the things that I find just generally impressive about you is that you also have published a lot of writing. Like your work is so often in like Ceramics Monthly and like it's sometimes okay, I have two different thoughts. I'm going
Okay.
to say them at once and you can answer whichever one sounds best to address first. But there's a part of me that's like, how the hell does Sue not have like 2 million followers on her Instagram because the information that you provide is just amazing, but also like social media as its own marketing thing is its own whole world. So I'm curious about how you have approached marketing and because you're clearly able to run a very effective business without having to like kind of do all the I don't know, gimmicky may be a dismissive way to say it, but like without having to follow like what the trends of the algorithm may like require.
Mhm.
But then I'm also very interested in how you started writing for Ceramics Monthly and like, how you went from the person who was worried about applying to the ceramics technician position because of imposter syndrome to being like, I'm going to submit articles to Ceramics Monthly.
Yeah.
So, whichever of
Yeah.
those two very different questions you want to ask first, but
The
I
second
want to.
question is easier to answer, but I'll answer both. So they approached me. So I was blogging and I had written, a couple dozen articles on my blog and I was blogging on just like the most frequently asked questions that I would get where instead of answering the same question over and over, I just wanted it on a blog so I could be like, here, go read this. And this
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
yes.
because once I started getting known for being someone who knows something about these things, then I got lots of emails where people are just wanting advice and asking me questions. And so the blog was just a way to like, put the information out there so that I could just send people to the blog rather
Yeah,
than,
yeah.
yeah. So Ceramics Monthly was like, hey, we want to publish your blog post and you don't have to do anything. We're going to edit it. Well, in the beginning, I had to edit them down from like my 3,000 word blog post to 1,000 words.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
now they're doing that for me.
Oh,
Good.
Yeah. And so it was like, you don't really have much work. We just want to kind of publish this post. And so I think I have like 7 or 8 on there that have been published now.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that was really nice. And like the social media part, I'm not a big social media person, especially Instagram. And I don't know, I have like 15,000 followers or something. So it's not nothing.
yeah, no,
Um,
you have a following for sure.
but
But
I
like, I
don't,
don't know, to me, like for the information you provide, I'm like, 15,000 isn't nearly enough. Sue needs
Yeah.
more, you know? Anyway.
I mean, but I don't spend time scrolling Instagram. And so there's a disconnect between what I'm supposed to be doing on there and what I'm just posting static images. I'm doing it the way I did it in like 2019 when that's all people did on Instagram. And I haven't really evolved to like make reels and all of that. It just kind of overwhelms me to think about like learning how to market myself properly on Instagram, and I don't really engage, like, so I'm not on there commenting on other people's posts. Like I feel like I'm a kind of antisocial in social media person. I'm more
Yeah.
into the Facebook groups. I have a Facebook group called Understanding Glazes with Sue, because I like reading. I don't like, if I'm on social media, I don't have my sound on. So all the videos that go by, like, just have no context unless there's
Yeah.
captions. But I like sharing links and resources and images, and I like to be able to help people. And Instagram, it's a little harder to do that because you can't share links. So if
Yeah.
someone's asking a question, I like to be like, hey, you should read this article here. And it's not always my article. I'll share other people's, information. But so Instagram isn't really work for that. But my Facebook group has, I think there's close to 40,000 people in there now. And it just
Mhm.
kind of runs itself. I'm in there making sure everyone's behaving, but I'm
Mhm.
not like the one answering everyone's questions. I make sure that questions are being answered nicely. And if it's something that, like, if I have time and it's something that I can contribute to, then I'll jump in and respond. But generally, yeah, there's so many people in there with so much knowledge that they're helping all the people in that group. And I just kind of get to just make sure that it's running smoothly and there's no spam. And I'm very proud that there's zero drama in my group. Like,
Yeah.
That's rare. I
Especially
heard
for
that's rare.
Facebook.
Yeah.
yeah,
Facebook
like nothing.
cohabitates that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's very respectful. There's very clear guidelines about what you're allowed to post, and it's like questions about glazes or sharing your glaze results, and questions about clay bodies and kilns, and that is allowed as well. Like, I don't know, I think people understand the rules and they're following them for some
Yeah,
reason. So,
that's good. Well,
yeah,
it was really something I've been curious about because I think there is this assumption that you have to keep up with the latest thing with social media. And I think it's for those of us, like I'm not really a social media person either. Like I probably would not have an Instagram, or at least I wouldn't be posting on it if I didn't like feel like I needed to for business. But
yeah,
it's also like, so I've been using Instagram as my primary like marketing tool, but I was curious how you approach it because I think again there's this assumption that you have to keep up, but I wanted our listeners to hear how someone like you has managed to build this thriving business without having to scramble to keep up with the latest, demands of our algorithm gods.
it's the
So,
email list. So that's something we
tell
haven't
me.
talked.
No!
Yes, tell
Oh
me. That was
no!
another thing I wanted to ask you about. So, okay, so
Oh,
Yeah.
Donte and I were
Lindsay's
talking
been
the
trying
other
to get me to
day.
do an email
Yes.
list forever.
And I did that. I've been suggesting it. And honestly, I've been working on it too because of you, because I've been on your email list forever. And I'm like, because of the ever changing algorithm gods, like
Mhm.
it is a buffer against that. But so tell me, how did you start
I don't like that you're
developing?
agreeing with her. I don't like.
Well,
I don't like.
Donte,
All
I'm
right.
just gonna have to do
I can't
it.
deny it now.
So yeah, so how
Yeah.
did you start building your list? Like what made you drawn to that and how has it changed over the years? Just tell me about it.
Yeah. So I went to college in 2015 or 16. I took a digital marketing program for 1 year. And so I learned about content marketing. So that's why I started my blog. And so the blog is to get shown up in the Google searches. So I chose my blog topics on like things people would ask questions about, so that if they're Googling, then my blog posts show up in the Google search. And then every blog post, because like I said, they're all like 3,000 words, like I write a lot. I made it where they could download the PDF if they give me their email address. So every blog post has an opt-in, as they would call it, where, okay, if you want this in your files, like you can just read it on my blog for free, but if you want to download it and have it in your records, then you give me your email address and I'll send it to you. And so those are my lead magnets, in air quotes, to use the marketing terms. So that was just a really effective strategy. And so I have like 22,000 people on my list. People unsubscribe all the time, like, and that used to bother me. And now, I'll get like 50 unsubscribes on a day that I send out a newsletter, and that's fine. If people don't want
22,000, that's a lot. That's a lot of people.
Yeah, and that's more than my Instagram followers and my Facebook followers, right? But it's direct because I'm in their inbox every morning. And so they're going to see my name, even if they don't open the email, they're going to see my name. Whereas the algorithm, if I'm at mercy to the algorithm, of my 15,000 followers, maybe like 86 of them will see my post or something, right? And so the email list has been really valuable. And then one day there was like a day that Facebook shut down or something, like a year or two ago. And I was like, oh, thank goodness I have my email list. Like, what if Facebook goes away or Instagram goes away forever? I own, I have the list. And so I've just been learning a lot about email marketing, and and so I focus more on that than I do on social media. I still post on social media, but it's less effective than showing up in people's inbox.
Yeah.
Fine.
What? Yeah, we've convinced him. On that note,
I'll work on it when I get home.
What advice would you give to someone who has maybe not really started an email list yet? Is kind of like, I don't want to like bug people, or I'm not sure what to write. Like, what advice would you give to someone who's wanting to start an email list, but wanting to do it in a way that's like helpful and effective and all that?
I'm already dead, Lindsey. What? You don't have to hit me. I'm already dead.
I think just start. So you just need a button on your website where people can sign up, and then just start sending something out once a week. You could start once a month if once a week the consistency is key. So even if I'm like, oh, I have nothing to write, like I'll send something, because it's just like keeping on top of people's minds, so that when I'm doing a course launch, it's not like, people haven't heard from me in 8 months and now I'm like, hey, want to give me your money to take my program? And so it's called nurturing, when you're just like, hey, here I am, here's what I talk about, here's what I do. If you're interested, keep following me. If you're not interested, you can unsubscribe, but it just keeps people in the loop. And then when, and what I share about, like, is hopefully getting people excited to keep learning more, so that when I do have a course offering, a bunch of people will be ready at that point to sign up. And so that's kind of in a nutshell. But I think just starting and being consistent with it, and people do care what you have to say. And I've struggled with that as well. Like, I don't want to bother people. And like, every time I'm like, oh, I'm going to annoy people. And sometimes people tell me that I'm annoying them. And I just had to learn to like, just let those things go. And, it's very rare, but yeah, if I'm in a launch and I send an email every day for a week or something, some people are going to let you know that that's too much, and that's fine. If they're not going to be a student of mine, they don't need to be on my email list. And so, but just remember that you're writing to the people that want to hear from you, and just have those people in mind while you're writing. And and then of course people will just share their opinions regardless. And that's the internet.
They're gonna say something no matter what. It's this the thing between me and Lindsay. I'm always trying to get ahead of the detractors and like say something. Like I pretend like they have an argument and then I'll fight that argument, and so I create this like, fictitious person.
Yeah.
And so when I write blogs, I'm always like, to the person that's gonna say this, here's my answer to you.
Yep.
But it's like you're gonna have detractors no matter what you do.
Yeah.
Like even if you kind of covered all your bases. So you're right. That's the way the internet is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I still hate those people.
So we have a last question that we always like to ask our guests, and since we could again talk until the cows come home, proverbially, we'll have just the one last question. Well, two last questions. First of all, where can people find you if they want to keep up with what you're working on and learn from you?
Yeah, well, my website and blog is at SueMcLeodCeramics.com. McLeod is spelled McLeod. So people often get that wrong, but you can just Google Sue Ceramics. It'll probably show up. And then Facebook, Instagram, all the places. It's Sue McLeod Ceramics.
We'll also, dear listeners, list all of Sue's links in the show notes as well, so you can look at that. So now that we have your pluggables, if there was, last question is, if there is an alternate universe, Sue McLeod, who had never discovered ceramics and was just living a completely different life, what would your alternate universe self do as a career?
Oh my gosh, I think I would be a geologist.
Oh, I love that.
Everything she says, I agree with all the time.
That hella makes sense. That I have a friend who's a geologist, and like hearing the way you guys talk and just the enthusiasm, it just, yeah, I see it. I see it. Tell me why. Tell me why.
Well, so many times because there's such a parallel between glaze chemistry and like crystals like amethyst and quartz and all of that. And I'm into that like from like a hippie perspective a little bit, like not super hippie, but then I'm like, I want to learn more about it, but I don't have time. Like I just don't have the capacity. So I'm always like, in another life, I would be a geologist and I would learn about, the world and like the earth in, more detail because I find it fascinating. I collect rocks on the beach all the time. I have like this massive rock collection and so I don't know. I think that's maybe what I would do.
Yeah, me too.
I love that.
I have a couple buddies who are geologists, and they we always kind of connect on that level because of the minerals things. But he's like, yeah, an oil company just kind of hired me to figure out where they could drill.
Oh God!
And I'm like, no. He's like, yeah, 80% of geologists are just like telling oil companies where they can and cannot do things. I'm like, oh yeah,
oh boy,
yeah,
oh boy.
At least I get to collect rocks.
At least you get to collect rocks.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Sue, thank you so much for coming on the Mud Peddlers. It has been so awesome to finally get to talk to you, and I think we probably reference you more than almost anybody else on the show.
Absolutely.
So we hope that not that you need the help, but we hope that your being on the show will get more people to follow you and learn from you because you are just so fantastically enthusiastic and you have a lot of knowledge to share. So I hope people who haven't heard of you will follow along. So
great. Thank you so much. This is so fun. Anytime.
Cool.
Awesome.
All right.
Thank you. Bye.
And that's it for today. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of The Mud Peddlers. We would love to hear from you, so if you want to share your thoughts about the episodes or just see what Donte and I are working on in our studios, come say hi. You can find links to my social media at lindseymdillon.com. That's LINDSEY, M as in monster, DILLON.com.
And you can visit my pottery shop or see what I'm working on at earthnationceramics.com. And you can find me all over social media at Earth Nation Ceramics. It's spelled exactly how you think it's spelled.
And if you want to support the show, hear some bonus episodes, and see some behind the scenes of my work, you can support me and the show at patreon.com/Lindsey M Dillon. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next time.